In 1873, the Italian ballerina Giuseppina Morlacchi, the world's most famous prima ballerina, married American cowboy Texas Jack Omohundro in Lowell, Massachusetts. This unlikely marriage united the refined world of European ballet with the rough culture of the American Wild West, creating a singular couple of their era. Camp at South Pass, at the southern foot of the Wind River Mountains, Wyoming, photographed by W.H. Jackson in 1870. South Pass was the point where the Oregon Trail crossed the Continental Divide, making it one of the most important locations for pioneers migrating westward. Jackson documented this history with great mastery. Martha Calamity Jane Canary with her pistol at her hip. When she moved west, she found the freedom to live in ways utterly unconventional for a woman of her time, wearing men's clothing, hunting, drinking, and working alongside men. Her freedom to be herself made her an enduring cultural icon of the American frontier. View of Tombstone, Arizona, around 1880. The silver mining town was founded in 1879 by Ed Schieffelin, who named his discovery Tombstone, an ironic name inspired by warnings that he would only find his tombstone in the dangerous Apache territory. The irony would soon prove quite fitting for this town of violence. Calamity Jane with friends in Gilt Edge, Montana, in 1897. Gilt Edge was a small mining town where Jane spent time during her wandering life across the American West. This relaxed photograph shows an ordinary moment among people of a frontier town, far from the legends and mythology that surrounded her famous name. Martha Jane Canary, the legendary Calamity Jane, was born on May 1, 1852, in Princeton, Missouri. An adventurer, explorer, and unique figure of the Wild West, her life was marked by exaggeration and invention as much as by real feats. She became a character in dime novels while still alive, feeding her own growing legend. The painting, Smoke of a 45, created by Charles M. Russell in 1908. Russell was the most important painter of the American Wild West, documenting with deep realism and nostalgia the lives of cowboys, indigenous peoples, and the animals of the Montana plains before that way of life disappeared forever in the early 20th century. Brigham Young, leader of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, photographed in Salt Lake City around the early 1870s. Young led the Mormon migration to Utah in 1847 and governed the territory for decades. His influence on the colonization of the West was extraordinary in scope and frequently controversial in method. A tombstone at Boot Hill, around 1880. Boot Hill cemeteries, found in many Wild West towns, were collective burial places for men who died with their boots on, meaning in armed confrontation. The fragility and brevity of life were constants in frontier towns throughout the most violent period of westward expansion. Apache warriors photographed around 1877 during a period of intense resistance to American expansion in the Southwest. The Apache were known for their extraordinary mobility and ability to survive in the arid terrain of Arizona and New Mexico, making American military campaigns against them exceptionally long and costly. View of Las Vegas, Nevada in 1895, years before it became the entertainment city it is today. At that time, Las Vegas was a small desert town, a stopping point for travelers and miners. Only in the 20th century would the city grow explosively following the arrival of the railroad and the subsequent legalization of gambling. View of Flagstaff, Arizona in 1883, when it was a young town along the Atlantic and Pacific Railroad. Flagstaff developed rapidly as a stopping point and commercial center for the region, benefiting from the timber and cattle industries. It became the gateway to the Grand Canyon and the cultures of the American Southwest. Frederick Wadsworth Loring, with his mule Evil Merodach, photographed approximately 48 hours before the Wickenburg Massacre and his untimely death in 1871. Loring was a young journalist and poet traveling with a geographical survey expedition, killed by Yavapai warriors in an ambush that claimed 5 members of the party. Miners washing and panning for gold at Rockerville in the Dakota Territory around 1889. The miners, Spriggs, Lamb, and Dillon, appear working with the gold pans and sluice boxes that were the basic tools of alluvial mining. Rockerville was one of the first gold mining locations in the Black Hills of the Dakota Territory. Geronimo, at age 69, photographed in 1898 after surrendering and living as a prisoner of war at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. The great Apache leader, whose real name was Goyahweh, was never truly released. He died in 1909 as a prisoner of war, never having been permitted to return to his ancestral lands in Arizona. The Tombstone Baseball Club, around 1880. This rare record shows that even in the most violent towns of the Wild West, there was organized social life beyond saloons and armed confrontations. Baseball became popular in the United States after the Civil War and quickly spread to frontier towns across the expanding American West. Jesse and Frank James, photographed around the 1860s, the James brothers became the most famous outlaws in American history. Jesse was the charismatic and violent leader. Frank was more reserved and calculating. After the war, the James Younger gang robbed banks and trains for more than 15 years across the Midwest. The well-stocked bar of H. Cook's Headquarters Saloon in Augusta, Montana, around 1900. Augusta was a small ranching town in western Montana that prospered thanks to the large cattle ranches of the region. The Headquarters Saloon reflects the saloon culture that flourished in virtually every town of the American Wild West. Gordon W. Pawnee Bill Lilly and his wife May in Pawnee, Oklahoma in 1886. Lilly was a rival showman to Buffalo Bill, creating his own Wild West show. In 1909, the two combined their shows into the Two Bills Show. May Lilly was herself a skilled markswoman who performed as a featured attraction in her husband's show. The Santa Fe Railroad Bridge over Canyon Diablo in Arizona around 1870. Canyon Diablo, whose name in Spanish means Devil's Canyon, was a formidable natural obstacle in the construction of the railroad. The town of Canyon Diablo that sprang up alongside the construction briefly became notorious for its extreme violence. On November 27, 1868, Colonel George Custer and the 7th Cavalry massacred the Cheyenne encampment of Chief Black Kettle at the Washita River in present-day Oklahoma, killing over 100 warriors. The attack was presented as a victory by the Army, but critics viewed it as a massacre of sleeping civilians. Mission San Miguel Arcangel in San Miguel, California, photographed around 1882. Founded in 1797, it was the 16th in the chain of 21 Spanish missions extending from San Diego to Sonoma. The missions were fundamental to Spanish colonization of California, but devastated local indigenous populations through disease and forced labor. Annie Oakley in Chicago around the 1890s. During this era, Oakley was at the peak of her fame, performing demonstrations that left audiences breathless. Her precision was legendary. She could shoot projectiles from the air, extinguish candles with a single shot, and hit tiny targets at remarkable distances with consistent accuracy. Donald McKay, chief of the Warm Springs Scouts during the Modoc War of 1872 to 1873, loading his Sharps .50-70 rifle. McKay was the son of Hudson's Bay Company trapper Thomas McKay. Warm Springs Scouts were crucial to the military campaign that finally defeated Captain Jack's band in Northern California. The 5th most popular post on our Wild West Pics in 2025, featuring the last photograph of Buffalo Bill Cody, taken a few days before his death on January 10, 1917. William Cody, the greatest showman of the Wild West, died without the fortune he had once accumulated, but with a legend that would outlast him by more than a century. The Sanger Flume House, part of the wooden flume that ran from what is now Hume Lake to Sanger, California, around 1890. This 70-kilometer flume was one of the greatest timber engineering works of the era, transporting sequoia logs down the Sierra Nevada through inclined wooden channels using gravity and water flow. Wild Bill Hickok at left, Texas, Jack Omohundro standing at center, and Buffalo Bill Cody at right. The three formed a famous trio of Wild West showmen who thrilled audiences in Eastern American cities with theatrical performances about frontier life long before Buffalo Bill launched his celebrated international Wild West show, Front Street in Dodge City, Kansas, in 1874. This iconic photograph captures the main commercial street of one of the most famous towns of the Wild West during its most intense period. Dodge City, nicknamed the Queen of the Cow Towns, was the destination for the great Texas cattle herds driving north along the Chisholm Trail. Jim Courtright was an American lawman known for extorting protection money from business owners in Fort Worth, Texas, from 1876 to 1879. He later became a hired guard for a mining company in New Mexico and was killed in a duel in 1887 by professional gunman Luke Short on the streets of Fort Worth. Cottonwood Charlie Nebo and Nick, photographed in the 1880s. Colorful characters like these were common in the towns and camps of the Wild West, where men with picturesque nicknames and extraordinary stories mingled with ordinary workers in a unique frontier culture that existed nowhere else in the world at that time. A Paiute group, also spelled Pa-Ute, near Cedar, Utah, around 1872. The Paiute people inhabited vast regions of the Great Basin, Nevada, Utah, and Arizona. Divided into numerous bands, the Paiute maintained a relatively autonomous existence longer than many other peoples, in part due to the isolation of their arid lands. The Cowboy, photograph taken near Sturgis in the Dakota Territory, now South Dakota, by John C. H. Grabel, around 1887. Grabel was one of the most prolific photographers of the Wild West, documenting cowboys, towns, indigenous peoples, and the landscape of the Black Hills region with notable artistic and documentary skill. Billy the Kid, the famous outlaw, photographed around 1880. This image, likely a reproduction of the only authentic tintype known of the Kid, shows the young man who became the most famous outlaw of the United States. He died at age 21, shot by Sheriff Pat Garrett at Fort Sumner, New Mexico, in July 1881. Deadwood celebrates the completion of a railroad section in 1888. The arrival of the railroad was a transformative moment for Wild West towns, connecting them to the rest of the country and accelerating both economic development and the end of the frontier era. Deadwood transitioned from a prospector's camp to an established city. The opening of the Cherokee Outlet for settlement in 1893. On September 16, 1893, more than 100,000 settlers raced to claim land plots in the Cherokee Outlet, one of the largest land runs in American history. The run opened 6 million acres of indigenous lands in present-day Oklahoma to American colonial settlement. Quanah Parker, photographed around 1890. Son of Comanche, Chief Peta Nocona, and white captive Cynthia Ann Parker, Quanah was the last great Comanche leader to resist reservation confinement. After surrendering, he became one of the most skilled defenders of indigenous rights before the American government. View north along Alvarado Street from Franklin Street in Monterey, California, in 1887. Monterey was the capital of Alta California during the Spanish and Mexican periods and an important port in the hide and tallow trade. By 1887, the city had been absorbed into the recently formed American state of California. 3 New Mexico cowboys enjoy themselves in 1882. This relaxed photograph captures the playful side of frontier life, often forgotten in favor of stories of violence and adventure. New Mexico cowboys were frequently of Hispanic origin. heirs to a long tradition of Mexican vaqueros who shaped the culture of the region. The Cosmopolitan Saloon in Telluride, Colorado, around 1910. Telluride was one of Colorado's richest mining centers, famous for its gold and silver. The Cosmopolitan was one of the most elegant establishments in town, which by this period had passed its wildest phase and was becoming a more settled and sophisticated community. A tombstone from around 1881, possibly from Boot Hill in Tombstone. The year 1881 was one of the most violent in Tombstone's history, culminating in the OK Corral gunfight in October. This type of plain, unadorned headstone was typical of frontier cemeteries where many men were buried without elaborate ceremony. On April 3, 1882, Jesse James was murdered by Robert Ford in his own home in St. Joseph, Missouri. Ford had planned James's death in collusion with the Missouri governor to collect the reward money. The cowardly act of shooting a man in the back transformed Ford into a villain and James into a martyr of American crime. Wyatt Earp, survivor of the 1881 OK Corral gunfight in Tombstone, died peacefully at age 81 in Los Angeles on January 13, 1929. Unlike many of his contemporaries, Earp survived the most violent era of the Wild West to witness his own mythologization by the nascent Hollywood film industry he consulted in his final years. On January 10, 1917, Buffalo Bill Cody died in Denver, Colorado, at his sister's home at age 70. William Cody was one of the most famous men in the world at the end of the 19th century, but spent his final years in financial difficulty. His legend, however, survived far beyond his life and remains vital today. The sixth most popular post on our Wild West Picks in 2025 features the famous image of Deadwood around 1876. The South Dakota mining town became the ultimate symbol of the American Wild West, associated with Wild Bill Hickok, Calamity Jane, and a period of chaotic freedom that lasted only a few years but generated eternal legends. The Dodge City Peace Commission, photographed on June 10, 1883. This group of lawmen was organized to maintain order during Dodge City's most turbulent period. Among the members were Wyatt Earp and Luke Short. The photograph is one of the most important documentary records of the history of the American Wild West. Dick Latham of Iron Mountain, Wyoming, returning from the plains with an antelope he had killed in 1888. This everyday scene from Wild West life shows the settlers' dependence on hunting to supplement their food supply. Pronghorn antelope were abundant on the Wyoming plains and were frequent quarry for cowboys and settlers. The Shoshone camp of Chief Washakie at South Pass, Wyoming in 1870, colorized image. Washakie was one of the most remarkable indigenous leaders of the American West, choosing to maintain alliances with the U.S. government rather than go to war. His strategy preserved Shoshone territory, and his leadership lasted more than 60 years. The ninth most popular post on our Wild West Picks in 2025, showing an Apache man photographed at White River on the Fort Apache Reservation in Arizona in 1900. This documentary image preserves the dignity of a people who fiercely resisted American expansion for decades before being confined to reservations in the arid Southwest. View of the California Gulch mines in Leadville, Colorado, around 1880. California Gulch was the birthplace of Leadville, founded during the 1860 gold rush and revitalized by silver discoveries in 1877. At its peak, Leadville was the second largest city in Colorado, with a population of more than 30,000 inhabitants. Mojave men and women and U.S. Army soldiers at Fort Mojave on the Colorado River, 1,150 miles west of the Missouri River, around 1868. The Mojave people had inhabited the Colorado River banks for millennia and maintained complex relations with American authorities who sought to control this strategically important region.